never know quite how many people we'll have at these sessions. Sometimes we get up to 50 and sometimes we have smaller intimate groups. So it's always a great opportunity to have our residents show up so that you can ask your personal questions about the sewer connection process. And that's essentially what we're here for today. There's a table in the back that has some reference materials, some materials that we've created in-house, as well as some from some partners that we work with. But essentially today what we're going to do is I'll introduce some of the team members that I have with us here today. I'll give a very brief, abbreviated overview of the problem. Why are we sewering? What is the comprehensive wastewater management plan? And then we're going to jump right into sort of where we're at currently, what projects are under construction, what folks are anticipated to be connected to sewer really in the short term here, the next year to 2 years. And then we'll go really into the meat of the presentation, which I think you're all here for, is what is the sewer connection process? What do I have to do when it's my turn to connect to the municipal sewer system? What are some of the anticipated costs involved? What financial resources are available? And then I'll invite Chris, our assistant communications, our communications assistant, up to talk through how we as a department at the Department of Public Works communicate with the public about the project. So that kind of segues nicely into introductions. I mentioned my name is Kelly Colby. I'm the communications manager for Barnstable's Department of Public Works. We do have a communications team at the town that we work very closely with, but as this project, the 30-year sewer expansion plan, has unrolled, DPW has made a conscious effort to hire dedicated communications professionals. So it's myself, and then our communications assistant, Chris Gadd, is here. And then we also have someone that you probably all are going to want to speak with, Nina Barrett, who is one of the project engineers, part of the sewer connection program. So specifically works with property owners throughout the sewer construction process, as well as helping with communications throughout sewer construction. So with that, just a quick reminder that we do record these sessions because we know this can be a tough time of day for folks. It's part of a continuing ongoing education initiative that we have with the Adult Community Center, but to make sure that the information is available more widely for other folks in the community, we do record these sessions. So David's here from our town communications team and Barnstable Government Access. So with that in mind, I just ask, if you don't mind, to please just hold your questions till the end. We'll certainly have time for questions, and then if you have very specific property-specific questions, I should say, when am I connecting, or a question about where your potential sewer connection may occur in your property, we can have those even individually between myself, Chris, and of course Nina. So certainly feel free to kind of keep those thoughts in your back pocket, and we'll make sure that we've got ample time to go through those. So just very quickly, if you're here in this room, hopefully it's because you've either been getting and receiving communications regarding the sewer expansion program, or you're just generally aware that we have a problem here in Barnstable. Essentially what the comprehensive wastewater management plan is built for is to address the nitrogen problem. Our waterways, specifically our embayments, are impaired by excess nitrogen. With that, that also brings up some groundwater quality concerns, of course, with any type of additional nutrients, whether it's nitrogen or phosphorus. Pond water quality concerns, again, more phosphorus related, but also nitrogen. That's where you see some of those cyanobacteria blooms and some of the various alerts and water quality warnings that go out during the summertime. The CWMP, our comprehensive wastewater management plan, also helps us to have the infrastructure needed for very targeted economic development. You need that infrastructure to have clean water and to ensure that we're treating our wastewater properly. And then it's also ultimately a regulatory requirement. And we'll get into that a little bit more on this slide here. Nitrogen pollution here in our town has been documented by the Massachusetts Estuary Project, MEP, and through that, what are called TMDLs, total maximum daily loads, were developed. And they're developed on a watershed by watershed basis. Barnstable has 7 watersheds that we directly are responsible for, and we have to make sure that our nitrogen levels, what we call almost like a nitrogen budget, are in line with those regulatorily held to TMDLs. So that's essentially what we're doing. There was a lot of work and research that went into developing this 30-year program. It was actually Fun fact, originally proposed as a 60-year plan, but the town council at the time knew that the town wasn't going to have an appetite to be going through construction for 60 years. So it was reduced to a 30-year plan, which is, there's pros and cons. A huge pro is it means that we clean our water up faster. But ultimately, we have to do this in order to comply with federal and state regulations and to come into compliance with those TMDLs. Now, why sewering? Well, Cape Cod Commission and various other groups have studied the nitrogen problem here on the Cape and in Barnstable, and plus or minus just about 78% of our controllable nitrogen, the nitrogen that we can control, that we're outputting, comes from our on-site septic systems. So ultimately, what are the options here? Current Title V systems do not remove, they're not designed to remove nitrogen at those levels. Currently approved innovative alternative septic systems, which you may have heard of, also do not remove enough of the nitrogen needed for Barnstable to come into compliance with those TMDLs. So ultimately, sewering is necessary. Now, the entire town isn't being sewered. There are portions of the town that are already sewered, and we'll look at that in a second when we bring up our map. But about 70% or so, 60% of the town will be sewered at the end of the 30-year program. So that brings us to what our plan is. You hear CWMP, Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan. Essentially, it is a 30-year plan broken out into 3 10-year phases. We're currently already halfway through our first phase. We're in year 5 of phase 1. When all is said and done, we'll have approximately 190 miles of new sewer infrastructure across town, and just shy of 12,000 properties will then have the ability to be connected, or at that time be connected to the new municipal sewer system. So as I mentioned, there's multiple projects. Some of you are probably here because you've received communication that you're identified as an upcoming project. But each phase is going to be broken out into separate individual sewer expansion projects. Phase 1 has about 17 individual projects, and we'll look at that in a moment as well. And then our next big project that we're about to break ground on early this winter is the Route 28 West Sewer Expansion Project, which is essentially the 4th major project in our program in phase 1, and probably the most important. It truly is the backbone of our system, and it's going to allow us to expand that municipal sewer all the way out to the 3 Bays watershed, which is our most heavily impaired watershed here in Barnstable. The plan does also leverage existing infrastructure. I'm not going to go into great detail during today's session because we're really here to talk about sewer connection, but we do often get asked, well, what about the treatment plant on Bierce's Way? That plant is actually undergoing major renovations and upgrades. Just over a year ago, Barnstable Town Council approved a $109 million appropriation with financing support through the state and the Clean Water Trust to make major upgrades to that plant to allow us to be able to have the capacity to treat the flows coming in through phase 1 and the beginning of phase 2, as well as deliver the next level of wastewater treatment. We're going to have a very high quality effluent at the plant when this project is done. And Chris is actually the expert here from the communication side on that project. He's been working hard on developing some web and digital and print materials as we prepare to really break ground. The crew has mobilized over at the treatment facility already, so that project is actively underway. The plan does also incorporate non-traditional and nature-based approaches, things like dredging, cranberry bog restoration, a number of other projects that are really spearheaded by Amber Unruh, our senior project manager for special projects at DPW. She's really our resident scientist, environmental scientist. And we also work very closely with the Barnstable Clean Water Coalition on various nature-based approaches. And then ultimately the plan was built to be adaptive. Things change, technology changes, financial situations can change, although I will say Barnstable is in a great financial place to support these projects over the next few years and has done so already. And part of that adaptive management means that we're required to pause, take a step back, and review our plan, this 30-year plan, every 5 years. And so if you caught on earlier, I mentioned that we're in year 5, so we are currently doing that 5-year adaptive management review right now. Town Council established an ad hoc committee made up of a variety of different citizens from across town with various backgrounds, as well as some town councilors, to lead those discussions, and they're wrapping up. They have one more meeting coming up in December. All of those meetings are recorded. We'll talk about how you can view those if you wish. And they'll be making some recommendations to Town Council that will be incorporated in our five-year adaptive management update plan, which is required to be submitted to DEP. We also do annual updates as well to the Cape Cod Commission, and we'll talk about where you can access those. Ultimately, the bottom line here, though, this 30-year plan does exactly what we need to do, and that is achieve our TMDLs through much modeling. We've been able to identify what areas need to be sewered in order for us to come into compliance and bring our watersheds into compliance. So I mentioned that this is a 30-year plan. This is essentially the 30-year map. Everything in gray here is what's already sewered, so that's a lot of downtown Hyannis. Anything that you see in red, and I don't know how clear the pointer will be, this is our phase 1. Much of this work here has already been completed, and we'll talk about that on the next slide. We're currently constructing what's called the Centerville Village North Phase project, which is a lot of the foundational work here along the west side of Lake Wequaquet. Future projects will go into these neighborhoods. And then I mentioned Route 28 West, which essentially takes the pump station at the corner of Finney's Lane and Route 28 and expands it all the way down out towards Cotuit. We have a number of other projects that are in design and will be going out to bid shortly for construction that we can talk about in just a moment. But then anything you see here in this sort of lime green, this is what's phase 2. So essentially year 11 through year 20 of the plan. So if we're in year 5 now, you're really only 5 years away from phase 2 starting. And then we've got phase 3 in yellow here, and that's the last 10 years of the plan. And then you'll also see this sort of purplish and light pink and various colors, light blue here. Those are what are called the stages. Those stages, when the CWMP was originally developed quite a few years ago, were identified as stages because there were conversations with some surrounding communities about potentially doing some nitrogen trading or how there could be some joint sewering that could happen. So it really gave, again, that adaptive feel to the plan to allow us to be able to decide how to treat those stages in those areas. Nothing has been set currently, but this is one of the topics that our ad hoc committee is discussing right now for our 5-year update about potentially moving those stages into phase 2. So more to come on that, certainly, if you live in that area of town. And then again, just briefly before we jump into sewer connection, this is our phase 1 project map. So we talked about a number of projects being complete already. This basically takes what you saw here in red and breaks it out into individual projects for you. So far we have completed really a number of projects. Some were done before the true CWMP, but our first 2 projects that were completed, both on time and on budget, would be this sort of purple here, what is called the Strawberry Hill Road project. This essentially sewered down Finney's Lane, as you may recall if you live in the area, Strawberry Hill Road and a portion of Craigville Beach Road. This was coordinated in conjunction with the Vineyard Wind project, simply to just allow us to be able to install the sewer first, which is the deepest utility, and also just coordinate the construction efforts so that although it was a long project, it would have been 2 times, maybe 3 times as long if they had come in and had to do their construction after us. So it allowed us to sort of do some of the timing and cut down on the length of construction. So that was our first project. Our second project, I mentioned the pump station at the corner of Finney's Lane and Route 28. It's sort of this dark greenish project. It's probably hard to see on this map here, depending upon where you're sitting. But it essentially took from Wequaquet Lane down to Route 28, that portion of Finney's Lane, as well as some portions of West Main Street and portions of 28. Again, also that large pump station that looks very much like a nice little Cape Cod cottage. That project was also completed on time and on budget, and now we are currently constructing this lime green, what we call the Centerville Village North project. So this is installing sewer on Chute Flying Hill Road from Service Road all the way down to 28 in portions of Old Stage. There is some overnight work occurring on 28 as well, and then there's this little sort of like dog leg here where there's a portion of work on Finney's Lane, and Main Street, and then the Mothers Park area. So this work is ongoing. It's been ongoing for about a year now, and that project is anticipated to be completed in the spring of '27. And then I did mention earlier too, the Route 28 West project. It's this red here, so you don't necessarily see it on this map, but it is going to install the sewer infrastructure needed on 28, as well as branch out into some surrounding neighborhoods. This is the project that we just recently held a construction kickoff meeting for at the end of October, and the contractor plans to commence their pre-construction activities in the new year. That pre-construction is typically some tree clearing or maintenance on some of the trees and the limbs, installing erosion control. So no active excavation just yet. That's looking like probably a February 26 timeframe. Similar to the work on 28 as the current project, we do anticipate all of this work on 28 being overnight as well. Certainly more to come as a construction schedule is developed for that project. And then I mentioned a number of projects that are in design. We won't go through all of them, but a big one is right here, this light sort of salmon pink color. This is the Finney's Lane Neighborhoods project. It's going to take all of that infrastructure installed on Finney's Lane and allow us to bring sewer into those neighborhoods. One of our largest projects in terms of number of properties that will be served. That project will be going out to bid this summer, with construction anticipated to start this coming fall of 2026. So really the next project on the docket for us. And we can certainly go through some of those projects in more detail, like I said at the end, if you have questions about your individual properties. But what I'd love to do is really get into, again, the bulk of the presentation, which is sewer connection and the sewer connection process. So what we talked about was really the sewer construction projects that the town leads. That construction happens in the roadway. We can have a conversation too. I know a lot of folks often will ask about, well, what about if I live on a private road? Essentially, the sewer construction happens in the roadway, typically down the center or somewhere within the right-of-way. If you live on a private road, like some of the Finney's Lane neighborhood projects, for example, some of those properties, we do take what's called a sewer or a utility easement over the private roadway. You will be notified well ahead of time. Actually, all of the Finney's Lane properties have been notified about that process already. It doesn't change the status of your road currently. I know there's some conversations happening at the town council level about perhaps maybe there might be an interest. But right now, your road stays private. It just gives the town the permission to install the sewer infrastructure in that private roadway. So we install the sewer in the roadway, and then we also leave what is called a sewer service stub at the property line for each property that has frontage along that roadway. So a great example would be Chute Flying Hill Road. I live off of Chute Flying Hill Road. They're installing sewer along Chute Flying Hill Road. They're leaving a stub for future connection on the property line for each property that has frontage on Chute Flying Hill Road. We engage with you well before that process starts. So if you're here today because of the Route 28 West meeting, that's great. It means we're doing our job, because at the start of a project, once the contract has been awarded to a contractor, the construction contract, we put together what's called a project notification mailer. We send that via certified mail to make sure that folks are getting it, and we have a record that it's been delivered to your property. It will get sent to your primary mailing address. So if your primary mailing address is off Cape, it'll go wherever you're receiving your tax bill, whatever you have listed as your primary address. In that packet, there is a nice little sort of what we call our property owner checklist that tells you just the most important need to know information. It includes a sewer connection form, which is the first sort of block you see here, as well as FAQs and a variety of other information about the sewer connection program. That sewer connection form is probably one of the most important pieces of material that we communicate to you. Now, while it's not required for you to fill it out and return it to us, if you ask Nina, she wants you to fill it out and return it to us, because it's really your opportunity as a property owner to give us information about your individual property, things like where your septic system is currently located, if you know how the plumbing exits your home. We do ask for a variety of other elements there that you can certainly have a conversation with Nina afterwards about. Some we don't expect you to know everything, and some items on the form you may know. We're here to work with you, but ultimately we take that feedback from you about your individual property and use it to make sure that we are installing that stub on your property line in the most efficient and effective place for your future connection. So we try to avoid things like driveways, like heavily wooded areas. If you're planning an addition on your home, or you have a beloved tree that you don't want to impact when you do your individual connection, we'll work with you to make sure that we can establish a location on your property line for that stub to be located, that it really takes as much of the burden off of you during the sewer connection process. So Nina can certainly talk more about that with you individually afterwards if you'd like. But that's really one of the first pieces of communication you'll receive from us, is that project notification mailer and your sewer connection form. Then the town sewer construction happens. As I mentioned, we install within the roadway. We'll leave a stub at each property at your property line within the right of way. We don't do any construction on private property. It's all within publicly owned space. Most projects, depending upon the length, will be anywhere from 2 to 3 years. We typically break these projects up into construction seasons, so a fall and a winter or spring season. Generally, we are doing construction from anytime, after the week after Labor Day through the end of school. We typically aim to wrap up by Memorial Day weekend, but oftentimes we can get extensions through the end of school. We like to make sure we're off those main roads during the summer because we all know there's increased traffic, and it just makes everyone's life a bit easier. So that will happen over, like I said, the course of 2 to 3 years potentially. Doesn't mean that they're doing construction in front of your property for that long. Generally, it's a couple months on any given street, and then they move on. But the road does have to be opened up a number of times, and that's something I always like to clarify for folks. It's not just one trench and you're done. There could be multiple trenches and multiple times that the road is opened up in front of your property or along the street where you live. There's sewer main that needs to be installed, whether it's force main or just gravity pipe. Sometimes there's other utilities that need to either be updated or relocated, such as water, for example. We've got ComWater, although they're not a municipally owned water purveyor, they are partnering us to do some upgrades to their system while we're operating on Chute Flying Hill Road, so that's a great example. And then there's also the service lateral, the stub, your future connection point. That's another instance where there's going to have to be excavation on the road. So I like to just set the precedent now that it's not just one and done. You'll see the contractors on the road opening the road a number of times depending upon how many elements need to be installed. So when all is said and done, we go through our testing of the system, the town formally accepts the sewer infrastructure, and we're ready to begin accepting wastewater flow. You will be notified first by the Department of Public Works because up until this point, over multiple years, you've only really been hearing from us. And we will send you what we call our project completion letter. Saying, hey, property owner, it's us, DPW. It's been fun. Probably not. It's probably been a little exhausting to live through the construction, to be honest. We try to keep it as painless as possible. Now you're going to hear from other departments in town. We're officially handing the project over to the Board of Health and the Health Division. They are the governing authority over septic systems and the sewer system, so it is the Board of Health who will mandate your connection. And then we'll also hand the project over to the Finance Department, the Treasurer Tax Collector's Office, as they handle the sewer assessment, which most people know as a betterment, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. So we'll give you that nice sort of handoff letter. We'll remind you of the sewer connection handbook, which we have a lot of copies here available today. We'll provide you with some other additional supporting resources and materials, but that's really our formal handoff to the other departments in town who will be now communicating with you. You are not required to hook up to sewer until you receive that notice from the Barnstable Health Division. That will come certified mail as well, and they will give you your timeline for connection in that notice. Now, the Board of Health policy is 6 months from the date in which you receive that notification, but that will, of course, vary. Your neighbor might receive it on December 5th, and then the neighborhood next to you, it might be December 10th. So there's always a little variety there. But essentially, you have 6 months from the date of receiving your notification, and the Barnstable Health Division does track those notifications. very thoroughly, and they also send out reminders at various points through that 6-month timeline. There are options and opportunities for extensions, and that's something that you would want to speak to the Barnstable Health Division about directly if that's something you'd be looking for, either an extension for financial reasons or an extension based off of contractor availability and scheduling. It's something that they routinely do and they look at on a case-by-case basis. But let's say you're ready to connect, you've received your notification, now you're going to hire your licensed sewer installer. Everything in those homeowner sewer connection guides that we have in the back there, it tells you step by step what you need to do. It breaks out this process in much more detail. It also includes a licensed sewer installer database, our list. We keep that updated regularly online, and then we do print these guides pretty much on a yearly basis now. So you always have a fresh print copy of our licensed sewer installers. Those sewer installers have been vetted to have the correct insurance, references reviewed to make sure that they've done these type of sewer connections. And they're folks that we work with generally all the time. So we certainly trust them to install those connections for you. You'll hire your licensed sewer installer. We always recommend, like any utility or home improvement project, that you do go out and get a number of quotes, 2 to 3 quotes. We've seen ranges of sewer connections anywhere as low as $4,000 up to $10,000+. It really is very property specific. Ultimately, what your connection cost is going to come down to is how much pipe, how much trench do they need to install essentially as they're connecting your property to the stub left at your property line. So those connection costs will vary property by property. What your neighbor is quoted, it likely will not be the same thing that you're quoted. It's very property specific, which again goes back to that first box there, why that sewer connection form is so important. We want to make sure we put that stub at your property line in a place that's going to make it as easy and affordable for you as possible come time to connect. So you've hired your installer. Now your sewer connection is going to occur on your private property. So it's going to pick up from that stub in the right of way at your property line, and it's essentially going to connect you, where the plumbing exits the building, your home on your property. Your sewer installer will design that connection for you. We do not require engineered plans for residential properties. I know that's a question we get asked often. And they will work with both Ansley, who is our sewer connection program manager, as well as Nina, who is also part of the sewer connection program, to work through getting the necessary permits to do the work on your property, and also to ensure that we have a DPW inspector on site during your sewer connection. We do this just to make sure that the connection is done to the town's sewer specifications, which are available publicly and made available to the licensed sewer installers. So we put a lot of checks and balances in there to make sure that the work is being done properly for you, but also, most importantly, that it's being fed into the sewer system properly as well. During this process, you also will abandon your septic system. So I mentioned earlier that the Barnstable Health Division is the governing authority on all things septic system as well as sewer. So they ultimately will tell you how to abandon your septic. In most cases, I want to say like 90+% of folks, you're really going to just crush and fill it in place. If you're planning a major addition on your property, you obviously aren't going to want to build over an old septic system, so you may choose to remove it. But any questions about septic decommissioning and removal, I would direct you to the health division for that. What I will say is that your licensed sewer installer can also assist with the septic abandonment process. So it's often something we like to remind property owners to make sure that you have that included in your quote for connection. And then once everything is all said and done, your connection is complete, it's been inspected by DPW, we sign off, your septic system's been abandoned, you're ready to begin conveying your wastewater flow. That whole process will essentially generate a tie card that will be kept in town records and will be sent to our water pollution control facility that lets the folks at the wastewater treatment plant know that you are ready to begin sewer service. And then you will be billed based off of your water usage, and you'll be billed for sewer like any other utility, and it will be billed to you at the same frequency in which you receive your water bill. So there's different water purveyors in town. I know Hyannis Water System, for example, is quarterly, I believe, right? They're quarterly. I think Calm Water may be biannually. So you'll be billed based off of that same frequency, but it will be a separate bill from Barnstable's water pollution control facility. And on average, currently it's been about $400 to $500 annually for your typical single-family home, year-round single-family home. So about $100 to $125 a quarter for sewer service. Now, I mentioned the Homeowner Sewer Connection Guide, the handbook. I mean, this really is not because we designed it, but I think a really fantastic resource for the community. We walk through everything I just showed you on that last slide, but in way more detail. We really spell out the process for you. We provide links to the website where you can get more information, and then we also have an appendix with a number of other materials as well. And then just briefly before we kind of wrap with some of our communications and open up for questions, there's obviously costs involved in this process. There's the costs that the town is paying for the installation of all of the sewer infrastructure, but there's also 3 costs that each property owner is essentially responsible for. We touched upon one that I'll go back to in just a moment, but the first really is the sewer assessment. A lot of folks know of this as a betterment. It's a term people are more familiar with, and it's essentially your portion of the cost for the sewer infrastructure that you're benefiting from. So the sewer assessment was voted on by Town Council back in 2021, and it was voted to be capped at $10,000 per sewer unit. I can tell you these first 2 projects, the sewer assessment has come in at less, but I always like folks to just have that $10,000 figure in their mind, because I've heard often varying figures from people. I heard it was $20,000, I heard it was $30,000. It's capped at $10,000 per sewer unit. So we're talking residential connections here. More often than not, that would be your cap. However, if you have an ADU, for example, you would be assessed another half sewer unit for that ADU. So your cap would be $15,000. But again, for your average single family home, we're talking $10,000 maximum for your sewer assessment or your betterment. Commercial units are defined a little bit differently. This session really is built for residential property owners, so I won't go into too much detail, but it's based off of Title V water usage and flows, and those units get calculated by multiple different departments in town. One thing I will note, if you live in an apartment or condo community, you are considered commercial. So your connection will occur as one connection for the entire community. You won't have an individual connection to your specific condo or apartment unit. And we generally work, Nina and Ansley's team generally work very closely with the property manager for those communities to ensure that connection occurs slightly, it's a slightly different process than the residential connection. So I mentioned hearing from the Treasurer Tax Collector's Office. They will notify you when they're prepared to bill for the sewer assessment. They will give you an estimated assessment first. This is what we anticipate it's going to be. If it's not that maximum $10,000, if it's under, we do our final calculations as we're closing the project out, and then they'll issue you your final sewer assessment. They will also give you the opportunity to either pay in full or amortize it and finance it as part of your quarterly tax bill. And you can do that up to 30 years. There is a plus 2% interest rate above whatever the town is currently borrowing at. However, we did just pass the flow neutral ordinance, which allows us to borrow with 0% interest. So moving forward, it's likely that you would only have a 2% interest rate. I think some current have about 3.5 if they finance their sewer assessments. But this does allow you the option to finance across 30 years. And then the sewer connection on private property, again, mandated by the Barnstable Board of Health, not by DPW. You'll hear directly from them as to when it's time to connect and what your timeline is. You can work with them on any extension requests. I noted that costs really will vary property by property. We've seen, like I said, the range of anywhere from as low as $4,000 to $5,000, more an average of $7,000 up to $10,000+. But there are a number of resources for folks specifically mandated to connect to sewer. And the number one resource, the premier resource, really is Barnstable County's Aqua Fund. We have pamphlets in the back from the Aqua Fund, but we also have information for both residential and those apartment condo communities directly in our guide as well. We work extremely closely with the Aqua Fund, their program team, and some of the program loan managers. They ask us on a routine basis how many connections we expect every year so that they can be prepared. They are well capitalized and can offer extremely competitive interest rates, 0 to 2% interest rates for new sewer connections and 4% interest rate loans for the commercial, the condo and apartment communities. And they're great. These are also what they call betterment loans and can be financed up to 20 years. So they've been fantastic to work with. However, there's also, there's some requirements there. You have to be a full-time Barnstable resident. So what happens if you're not? What happens if you're a second homeowner? There are other programs available, some of which we note in our connection guide, but are listed on our website. Cape Cod 5 has a program. The Cooperative Bank also has a program as well. And then in our guide, we also go into detail about the Mass State Tax Credit, which offers a lot of relief for folks who are either upgrading septic systems or connecting to new municipal sewer systems. So there really is a lot of, I'm not gonna pretend like it isn't an expense. It is, obviously. I live here in town, so I feel that burden as well. But there are a lot of programs available, and our job, Chris and myself, is to make sure that you're aware of those and that you have access and information for those programs. And then the last is the utility billing, which we noted will occur based off your water usage, will be billed at the same frequency as your water bill. And then just one thing to note is we do often get asked about reduction programs for irrigation. There are deduct meters that can be installed once you're connected to sewer to deduct the irrigation, the water you're using for irrigation that doesn't really enter the waste stream, the wastewater stream. Hyannis Water System has been doing this program for years. Calm Water is developing their program, and I'm sure others will be doing the same as we continue our sewer expansion. So that is something to certainly look into as you prepare for sewer connection, because it can certainly help you realize a cost savings if you have irrigation on your property. And then I did note a few times here, Barnstable Water Resources, we have a very comprehensive website. It's run specifically by DPW, by Chris and myself. And we've really expanded it beyond just the sewer expansion program. We have coastal resiliency projects on there now, drinking water projects if you're interested. But this is where you're going to be able to access those maps I showed you before, digital resources to some of the print resources we have here, as well as really just get updates on sewer construction as well as the sewer connection process. We've done a number of recent website improvements. So we have sort of some new overview pages that I won't go into too much detail on. There is a contractors portal. So if you're interested in the materials that your licensed sewer installer will need to have and will need to review, there's an entire portal built specifically for our licensed sewer installers. There's also all of our water quality monitoring programs and information available, as well as our freshwater ponds and lakes. I know we talk a lot about sewering for our embayment health, but there's a number of programs to improve the water quality in our ponds and lakes as well, and we detail all of that on the website. We also have a ton of other just great resources, video libraries, a newsroom where you can get a catalog of all of our recent press releases and roadwork advisories, as well as information to connect with us on social media and subscribe to our email. And then this great handy public project map as well. Previously, if you were curious about whether or not you were receiving sewer, our best answer was, well, go to the assessor's database, look up your property. It'll tell you if you're receiving sewer or not as part of the 30-year plan. And if you are, it'll give you what phase you're in. But then folks will always want to know, well, what else? What project? What's my timeline? Now we have the ability to show you what project you're in if you're in phase 1, to give you a little bit more of a more fine-tuned timeline as to when we expect construction. So that map is publicly available thanks to Chris, who worked on that with our town IT and GIS department. And we can also certainly always take phone calls. We're happy to walk you through your property, your specific property as well. And before we conclude, I'll just have Chris come up here and talk about all the ways that DPW communicates with you outside of meetings like this.
All right, thank you, Kelly, and I just want to make sure that I'm on the right. Okay, cool. So as Kelly mentioned, the Department of Public Works has hired 2 people, myself and Kelly, to make sure that we get the good word out there, to make sure that you are aware when there is construction happening, make you aware when a road is being closed, when you are anticipated to receive sewer, all of those good things. There are 3 main ways that we do that. Mailings, digital, and in person. I will always emphasize that mail will always be the most important stuff. If your road is getting closed, we're going to tell you by mail. If you're anticipated to receive sewer as part of a project, you're going to get a piece of mail. We do send both certified and standard letters. Certified just gives us that proof of a receipt saying, hey, John Smith signed off on this letter to make sure that he got it. And that is primarily used for our sewer connection form. We also do use standard USPS number 10 envelopes as you would sending a letter to the grandkids or whatever. We send those through the mail. One of the things we're potentially doing is postcards. We're actually possibly adding that in because we understand that a lot of people, especially on the Cape, just love getting that physical mail, and we want to meet you where you are. If you are so inclined to be more digitally apt, that is awesome. We love that as well. We do have a variety of resources that you can utilize. One of them is the weekly Barnstable e-newsletter. If you don't already receive it, you should absolutely sign up for it. In that e-newsletter, there's a section, it's always right at the top. It's a white background. It's got like orange, like a backhoe and a bulldozer, I think. And it says just road and construction updates. Every week we update that. So you may know that there's a project going on, for example, the Centerville North project. Sure, it's going on. In e-news, we will actually say, hey, Chute Flying Hill Road is closed as part of this project. Route 28 West is, Route 28 between Old Stage and Finney's Lane is closed from, I forget what it is, 7 p.m. to 6 a.m., I think it is, Monday to Friday morning. So that is distributed weekly. It is one of the best resources out there. We do also utilize social media and the My Barnstable app. We have the town social media. We also have the Barnstable Water Resources social media. Both are posted on. The Barnstable Water Resources tends to be more educational, but we do occasionally post construction-related updates. If there is something major that occurs, we'll post it on the Town of Barnstable Town of Barnstable social media. For example, I think it was 2 Fridays ago now that we had a water main break, and that was immediately posted onto the town social media saying, hey, stay away from the area, we're getting it fixed. And then once we did get it fixed, it was updated on the social media site. If you have not already, we do recommend downloading the My Barnstable app. It is just a great resource for you to have. We can send push notifications right to your phone. Again, with that example of the water main break, we sent an app notification saying, hey, there's a water main break, we're shutting down the road temporarily, and then we sent another app notification when it was reopened. Kelly already talked about the website, and I cannot stress this enough. It is a very important website. It is every bit of information that you think you will need is on that website. Kelly and I spent the summer working over it with one of our interns and making sure that the information that was needed is on that website. And we are always continuing to update and improve the said website. The last version, or the last type of communications and outreach that we do is this, the in-person outreach. Project meetings, we just had one on 28 West at the end of October. We had about 100 people in this room. We opened up the backside, of course, to let people know. We are getting ready in a few months. We're going to have one for that Finney's Lane neighborhoods, that design meeting. We actually have 2 project meetings per project. So the first one is a design meeting. The second one is the actual construction before construction begins. We do association meetings if you're part of an HOA, if you're part of a civic association, if you and a bunch of your neighbors just really want to learn more about the CWMP, you can reach out to Kelly and myself, and we are more than happy to arrange, an evening meeting, a middle of the day meeting, whatever it may be. And then the last one is door to door, pardon me. We have a team of inspectors, and along with actually inspecting and making sure that all the construction is happening correctly into specifications, one of the things they do, they will actually go, as it sounds, door to door. If they haven't gotten your sewer connection form, they will ask you to fill that out. And if there's something else that is really important, for example, hey, you're going to have limited access to your house because we're going to be working at the intersection here. You'll still be able to get by. You are always able to get by if you're local, or if you have an emergency, you're always able to access it. But that is the purpose of our in-person inspectors. Kelly already talked about the public CWMP project map. We just love shouting it out because it used to be that our wonderful admin assistants had to answer every single phone call and work their way through this map, which used to be about 300 layers. It's now 3. So if you ever want to do that, awesome. I will also note that I made a guide for the map that walks you through literally step by step what to press to make it work for you. More CWMP resources. A lot of this is doubling up. The homeowner sewer connection guide, I'm not going to talk about it more because Kelly already did a fantastic job on it. I will just note, again, downloadable at barnstablewaterresources.com. We do have print copies available all over town. There are obviously some on the back table. There is a supply kept here at the Adult Community Center. We have a supply at the DPW. There's some over in the Health Division at 200 Main Street. There's some over at Town Hall, some of the libraries. They're all around. You can also just email us or call us and say, hey, I want this, and we'll tell you the easiest way to get it. The sewer connection process document. This is a document that you will get once you are ready to connect to sewer. I believe it gets sent out with the Health Division's certified mail saying, hey, you're required to connect now. It's basically everything that Kelly said, that 8 steps on one sheet of paper. And for that, we do have Portuguese and Spanish translations available. We're working on getting our other documents translated, but it's expensive. I already mentioned town resources, Barnstable e-news for weekly traffic impacts and project information. I'll also mention, I forgot to mention earlier, that on e-news, we will also, in like the listing of all the graphics, we'll include stuff about our meetings. We'll include flyers and information if we have them. My Barnstable app, already talked about, and then at Town of Barnstable on Facebook and Instagram is your source for everything about the town. And then this is the Barnstable Water Resources social media, at Barnstable Water Resources. I know we're very original. Facebook and Instagram, we do our best to post frequently. On our website, there is also a video resource, a video page with a whole bunch of resources. We've had a Discover Barnstable podcast. If you're not subscribed to that, I also recommend you do. Gives you great insight into many of the town's functions that you're not even aware probably are happening. We did a special series before I was even here about waterworks, basically how it works. There's a conversation about sewer connections, which I believe was Kelly and Ansley. There is a tour of the water pollution control facility from 2 years ago, and then there's another one from last year. And when we're done with the construction, I can guarantee you that there's going to be a third one talking about exactly how wastewater treatment works. I'm also working on even more videos, exactly why we're doing the CWMP, the sewer connection process, that form that we were talking about that you get mailed. I'm working on how to fill out that form because we know that it is a daunting task, and we're trying to make this as easy as possible for you. So these are all going to be on the Barnstable Water Resources webpage under the video tab. It will initially be shared to Barnstable Government Access and probably reposted on our social media. Before I take questions, I will note we are more than happy at any time to answer your questions. I already mentioned the website. This is the DPW's phone number. It directs you right to our admin assistants up front. You can call them. They can try to answer your question. If they can't answer your question, they will find us, or they'll give you our work cell phone numbers or our emails so that you can get your question answered. Water resources at town.barnstable.ma.us is our email. It goes to myself, Kelly, Ansley, and then the town communications team. If you would rather email, personally, I prefer email instead of calling, but you can absolutely call, email, whatever you want. A little bit of an insight. I don't know if I'm going to get in trouble for this. Town.barnstable.ma.us will soon become barnstable.gov. The town.barnstable.ma.us will still work, but it's just shortening it up, thankfully. And then the last one, 382 Falmouth Road, Hyannis, Mass. If you take a right out of the Barnstable Adult Community Center, go down until just before you hit Beerus's Way, there's a building on the left. That's the DPW admin building. Between about 7:30 and 3:30 anytime. You can stop in, you can ask your questions, again, to our admin assistants. I also sit up near the front, so you might be asking for me. You might get Kelly, you might get Nina, but someone will help you. All that to say, please, we know that the CWMP is large. We know that sewer connection can be daunting. If you have any questions, if you think of any questions after this, please feel free to reach out. We are more than happy to help. With that, are there any questions? Yes, sir.
A couple of things. So I live in Marcy's Mills, and I had a home with an apartment, so that's 10,000.
What, I can't speak without knowing your exact property, but if it's considered an ADU, correct? I would assume?
I'm sorry?
An additional dwelling unit, an ADU?
Yeah.
Yes, so that would be a half credit, half sewer credit, so it would be the 10,000 and 5,000.
Okay.
Yep.
And then the second question, I saw irrigation. What about washing your car, watering your garden?
That's all considered really storm water. That will flow down into the stormwater drains. I'm not sure if they would consider that irrigation and be able to deduct it. It might be something you'd want to ask your water purveyor. But certainly the irrigation can be deducted. And they may, I don't know how the deduct meters work personally. It may be if it's coming from your hose, then that's considered irrigation and can also be deducted. Right. Right. Yep, I would just inquire with your water purveyor. Yes.
I have a question in regards to private roads. Where I live, it's considered as a private road.
Mm-hmm.
Is the assessments any different than that on a private road for paving or?
No, so that's a great question. I meant to repeat the question. Sorry, David. So the question here was private roads. Is there any difference in assessment for private roads? No, in terms of the sewer assessment, there is no difference. It does not matter if you live on a private road. Really, the only difference with a private versus public road is the fact that the town needs to take that temporary or that sewer utility easement over the right-of-way to be able to legally install the infrastructure. But the assessment would not change. It would still be based, the assessment essentially is calculated based off the total cost of all the infrastructure for any given project, divided up by all the properties who are benefiting from that infrastructure. So for some projects, like Finney's Lane, for example, there's like over 500 properties. It's likely that that assessment will be under 10,000 because there's a lot of properties, a lot of people benefiting from it. For other projects, the assessment would be well over 10,000, but council has capped it. So the private road, public road doesn't change that.
So I had heard earlier, because this is, when people talk, I think they talk out of line without knowing the details. And the details you're providing here seem to be much more in line and make sense, but what was being said to us is that we were gonna get assessed for the installation, then because it's private roads, we'd have to agree as a association to have the roads repaved.
No, actually, nope. So I'm glad you brought that up. The second part of the question is, what about repaving of roads? Whether it's a public or a private road, we repave curb to curb after construction. And we do talk to a number of associations. I don't know if you live within Lake Isle Woods, perhaps, but we do talk with the Lake Isle Woods Association every year, and that's something that they've asked also. But no, we repave all roads curb to curb. Now, if you live near Chute Flying Hill Road like I do right now, you're gonna have a season of the temporary trench patches. That is normal. That is part of the process. Regardless of if it's a neighborhood road or a more well-traveled main artery road. That is a natural part of the construction process because we want those trenches to settle over a season before we pave them. The last thing you want to do is pave a fresh road, the trenches settle, and then you've got this roller coaster effect. So you allow that natural settlement for at least a season, typically 90 days, if not more, and then we do repave, and we also restore right-of-way, even on the private roads. So that loam and seed and...
The location I'm talking about is Hickory Hill Circle in Barnstable, or off of Barnstable.
Oh, yep.
Our streets are
Yes.
really, I suspect there'd have to be some lifts.
Yeah, so I'm not entirely sure of the design for that particular neighborhood yet. We can certainly look after and see what project you're identified in, and then what status it's at. Depending upon topography of neighborhoods, there may need to be risers, which are common for sewer construction. There may need to be some low pressure sewer as well. There's a whole design team at DPW who handles initial design for all of our projects, usually through the halfway point, and then we'll bring on consultants to assist with the rest of the design. But yes, it does depend on topography.
I suspect it's too early to know these things yet. I know I'm told we're in the first phase for this.
Yeah, well, I can tell you I certainly wouldn't know the design yet, but we can take a moment afterwards. We can look up your property and we can tell you what project you're in and what the timeline is.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Any other questions? Yeah, we'll go here first. You're welcome.
Okay, I'll start. Two questions, please. One, I was kind of surprised to see that the wastewater treatment plant, I think it was slide 2 or 3, the nitrogen release is 5%. When the rest of the town, all that water is going into the wastewater, it's not going to be 5%. It's going to be 10 or 20. Has anyone figured out how much will still be? It's still a great thing, but you know,
Yeah, so
it's not 100%, so the more water that we put through it, the more nitrogen is still going to be relieved after we've spent all the money.
nope, that's a great question. So the question is, when you go back to, and it's quite a ways back. I can try to go back quickly without making us all a little seasick here. When you look at the controllable nitrogen sources on Cape Cod, so this is really Cape Cod wide. It's not just Barnstable, but Barnstable is a great example here. The wastewater treatment facilities do attribute about 5% of the controllable nitrogen. And so you have to think of it in a couple of different layers. The wastewater is treated at the plant, and then the effluent currently right now is distributed through those sand beds behind the plant, if you've ever watched a tour or you've been to the plant for whatever reason. So it's treated down to a certain level. Currently, right now, we get, 6?
So,
Chris probably.
yeah. So the plant is currently permitted for effluent up to 10 milligrams per liter. The plant currently produces effluent at 6 milligrams per liter of nitrogen. When the project is done in 2029, it'll be down to 3 milligrams per liter.
Yeah, so part of the upgrades happening at the treatment facility is number one, bring the concentration of nitrogen in our effluent down to be able to come into compliance with TMDLs, specifically at the Lewis Bay watershed, because that's where that water is really being impacted from the treatment plant. So a lot of the work that's ongoing as of like really this month there is to help bring the quality of effluent, make it a higher quality effluent, but also bring down that concentration of nitrogen. To your original point though, all of that is factored into the 30-year plan. So before the CWMP could be regulatorily approved by the state, by the commission, they had to be able to show that with all this additional flow coming in, not only do we have the capacity to treat it at the treatment facility, but we can bring the quality of effluent down low enough where we'll be able to come into compliance with those TMDLs, and we will not be impacting the watershed with the effluent.
So it has been taken into account. My second question, I'm on the housing committee for the town of Barnstable, and I'm quite concerned the 30, 60, 80% area median. People get, and nothing's affordable, but more affordable housing because they have limited income. Is there any exemption for someone who has a affordable home getting hit with a $10,000 bang, and you're going to spend another $100 or $200 on the monthly sewer costs? They may lose the affordable home, is my concern.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the question is, what about folks who are on fixed incomes or live in affordable housing? How are they potentially impacted with sewer connection? I mean, it's a tough question to answer, honestly, and it's not something that DPW really has any authority over. The mandate to connect to sewer comes from the health division. And I'm not trying to say that as like, oh, go blame the Board of Health, because quite frankly, the Board of Health has been very accommodating to folks who have financial circumstances and have given a number of extensions and variances already for folks for financial reasons. But there are, like I said, a number of programs to help offset or at least help with the financing of costs. But to your point, that doesn't necessarily help someone who's already in a financial situation where they can't afford it. I know there's been a lot of talk about grants being developed to help folks who financially may not be able to afford the connection despite being granted extensions. But that's certainly a real concern, because as a town, as a municipality, we have to do this. I mean, it's no secret that we've already been, in litigation with, Conservation Law Foundation, even though we're actively executing a plan, and doing the best we can as quickly as we can. But we're federally regulated by those TMDLs, so we have to do something. And even the idea of an innovative alternative septic system isn't enough. It won't get us what we need to come into compliance with the TMDLs. So while we're exploring, especially in this first 5-year update, we're exploring other options to potentially be able to alleviate some of the sewering needed. There's gonna be sewer needed. And there's gonna be those situations where it's a financial hardship for people. So the best answer right now is working with the Health Division and the Board of Health. They've been, as I said, very generous and very accommodating of circumstances financially for folks. And then also really continuing as a community to lobby for more assistance for folks. The Aqua Fund's a great program, but it's a loan program. The state tax credit, great program, but you have to be a year-round resident to get the full tax credit. So there are programs available, but I think the next step really is working with legislators to get some type of grant programs for folks.
It'd be nice, because even if you extend it 20 years, even if you give a 2% rate, it's still another monthly thing.
Right,
for someone
right.
who just qualified for affordable
Right.
housing to say, oh my gosh, I'm in the same situation I was before.
Absolutely.
And it's so important to have a roof over your head. I don't think people, yeah, it's important, but they don't understand where would any one of us go. It's almost dark. If you had no place to go, and the shelters fill up at 7 or 8 o'clock, we need to keep people in the houses. We need to keep, and we need clean ocean too.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the Board of Health has been very sensitive to those issues, and they've been working with folks who have already been mandated to connect who it is a financial hardship for.
I just for clarification and understanding, the effluent that's processed is pumped into Lewis Bay, or is that?
No, it's not pumped into Lewis Bay. It's infiltrated through sand beds that are on site at the Water Pollution Control Facility, and then it travels through groundwater over years and years and years and years before it will. There's a whole science behind groundwater. Actually, we have a great video from our director that explains how groundwater works. But that is one of the concerns in the current litigation, is that
Think of the probably millions of gallons of water that's going to be processed. Will that system actually function?
yeah, so interesting enough, without getting too ahead of ourselves, once the work is done at the treatment plant, we will be set up to have a level, we'll essentially be given, not only will we have a higher quality effluent at the end of this current project, but we'll be set up to add on additional treatment capacity, or treatment functionality, I should say, to be able to tackle things like some of those CECs, contaminants of emergent concern. Like our assistant director and director are looking closely at when is PFAS going to be potentially regulated in wastewater effluent. What about microplastics? The direction they're taking the plant, we ultimately will have distilled water at the end of the day when treatment is done. So that's a conversation we'll be having sort of for phase 2 effluent disposal. What do we do with that? At that point, it's a resource. And you're almost contaminating it by putting it in the ground at that rate, when you just think of what's in the groundwater already. So there's a lot of work that's gone into the developments and the upgrades at the treatment facility. And I think if you wanted to get into the science of it, our assistant director would probably be happy to chat with you. But it really is going to be a next generation treatment facility, probably one of the leading in the whole Northeast. And it will give us a product that will ultimately be a resource at the end of the day.
That's good to know. Thank you.
Of course. Yes.
That fertilizer of 9% seems pretty high. Is the town looking at that?
Yeah, so that's a great question about fertilizer. So this data is from, I don't think we have, from June of 2015. So we're talking 10 years ago, this data, but this is what was used for the basis of the CWMP, which was essentially approved back in 2020 is when it started going through regulatory review, and then 2021. So while it's old now, it wasn't old when we built the plan. There's a number of things that they've done. I know that town municipal golf courses have all been pushed towards organic fertilizers. There's also a fertilizer ordinance in town that we've done some additional education around. Us here at DPW specifically, working with some of the pond and lake coalitions and like the Lakewood Quacket Protective Association, for example, to educate folks about fertilizer policy and fertilizer use. But there's certainly, I think from the commission standpoint and a county standpoint, there is more work to be done. A lot of people will look at that number and think, well, we can knock a bunch of nitrogen off right there. It's hard because a town may put an ordinance in like we do, but what's stopping someone from going to Yarmouth or Dennis and buying a fertilizer that we don't allow you to use here, And that's just an example, an anecdote. So it's certainly more challenging to enforce, but it's become a very important topic of conversation at the town council and town leadership level to make sure that enforcement is stronger here in town. Any other questions? Great. All right, well, we will be here. If you have any more personal property specific questions, feel free to come grab one of us. Thank you all so much.